The forest didn't care if you lived or died. That's what Miles Granger reminded himself every morning when he woke beneath his tattered tarp, the smell of pine and cold earth in his lungs. Out here, survival wasn't a weekend hobby. It was the line between seeing tomorrow or becoming part of the soil. 3 weeks earlier, Miles had driven into the northern Cascades chasing solitude and answers. A storm turned into a landslide, and a landslide turned into isolation. His truck, phone, and every piece of comfort were gone. All he had was a knife, an empty backpack, and a stubborn will to live. The first 2 days were about denial. He thought he could hike back to civilization. By the third, hunger spoke louder than logic. That's when he remembered what his grandfather used to say, "The forest doesn't feed the lazy. You eat when you learn to listen." So he listened. The wind through the trees carried secrets. The birds' sudden silence meant predators were near. A rustle in the underbrush was either your dinner, or what might make you its dinner. Miles began with foraging. Early spring made it tricky, plants were still waking from winter's grip. But nature always gave clues to those who paid attention. He searched near creek beds where edible greens grew best. He found cattail shoots, tender, white, and rich in starch. The taste was earthy, bitter, but it kept his stomach quiet. Next came dandelions, not just weeds but lifesavers. Every part was edible. He boiled the roots for a bitter tea that eased the ache in his gut. The leaves, though sharp on the tongue, filled him with something close to strength. But food wasn't just about finding, it was about avoiding death by mistake. Miles learned to test unknown plants using the universal edibility test his grandfather once showed him. Touch to skin, wait. Touch to lips, wait. Chew spit, wait again. Patience was survival. By the 5th day, patience had turned to desperation. Foraging alone wasn't enough. He needed meat, protein, fat, warmth from within. So he began to hunt. No bow, no gun. Just a sharpened stick hardened by fire and a few handmade snares from vines and bark. He studied the signs, broken twigs, droppings, tracks pressed into the mud. That's how he found his first trail, a rabbit path winding through the ferns. He built a figure 4 trap, a simple device his grandfather used to teach him about leverage and patience. Then he waited. The night grew long and cold, the kind that gnawed through your bones and whispered that giving up would be easier. But Miles stayed awake, listening to the forest breathe. At dawn he checked the trap. It worked. He knelt beside the small, still body, whispering a quiet thank you. Taking life to save your own was never easy. He cooked the meat slowly over coals, using a flat stone as a pan. The scent filled the air, and for the first time in a week he felt human again. But the forest tested him harder the next day. Rain. Heavy, endless rain. His fire died. His clothes soaked through. He shivered until his muscles locked. Every drop felt like punishment for daring to survive. He found shelter under a fallen cedar, carving out a small hollow with his knife. Using dry moss from beneath bark, he managed to spark a flame again. Tiny, fragile, but enough to push back the dark. The warmth reminded him that survival wasn't about strength, it was about refusal. The refusal to quit. On the 7th night he heard wolves. Far off at first. Then closer. Their howls rolled through the trees like thunder. He gripped his knife, heart pounding. He wasn't the top of the food chain here. Not anymore. But fear taught focus. He built a ring of fire, fed it with damp wood to keep the smoke thick. The wolves never came closer. By morning, only paw prints circled the perimeter, a warning and a promise. Days turned to weeks. Miles learned the rhythm of the land. He found acorns to crush and soak, turning them into edible flour. He discovered mushrooms that glowed faintly under moonlight, beautiful, deadly, best avoided. He crafted fish traps from woven sticks and caught his first trout by sheer luck. Each victory felt like a miracle earned in blood and blisters. He grew lean harder. The man who had entered the forest was gone, replaced by something older, quieter, something that understood balance. One afternoon, while tracking deer near the ridge, he stumbled upon an old campsite. Rusted tins, a tarp shredded by time, and something miraculous, a flare gun half buried beneath wet leaves. His hands trembled as he cleaned it, loaded it, and pointed it skyward. The red blaze cut through the clouds like hope itself. 2 days later, the sound of helicopter blades broke the silence. When the rescuers found him, Miles looked more like part of the wilderness than a man. Dirt-streaked, gaunt, eyes fierce with life. One rescuer asked how he'd lasted so long with nothing. Miles smiled faintly. "I didn't have nothing," he said. "I had the forest. I just had to learn how to listen." As they lifted him into the chopper, he looked down one last time at the sea of green stretching endlessly below. For some, it was a place of danger. For him it was a teacher, harsh, wise, and fair. And deep down he knew, if the world ever fell apart he'd survive again. Because once you've eaten from the earth and earned your place among its creatures, you never truly go hungry again.